to worship. What a beautiful weekend we've had. A little warm. You notice the new worship center behind us. I'm hoping that I'm speaking loud enough so you can hear over the beautiful sound of the fountain. My name is Sarah Haldeman Scar, and I pastor this wonderful congregation, Faith Community of San Diego First Church of the Brethren, located at 3850 Westgate Place. We are a congregation that believes Jesus is the center of our faith. Community is the center of our lives, and reconciliation is the center of our work. We live these three values as a community that advocates for justice and offers holy hospitality here on campus for asylum seekers. So we like to invite you to worship. Join us as we together come and worship God. The hymn that you just heard was I See a New World Coming. It was sung by a virtual choir of 50 this past week as our annual conference gathered together in worship and in concert. If you were able to see those worships, they were inspiring. And San Diego First Church had a little bit of a PR piece, a public service announcement, so to speak, in the worship that happened on the 1st. You could go to brethren.org and get a look at that worship as well as the conference. So we are so appreciative of being able to share these music spots as a part of our worship. They are a voice of love as they come to us from all over the country. We do see a new world coming. It's a little bit odd this weekend as we celebrate our independence and as we need to hold the tensions of freedom side by side, and the challenges that we have as we relearn our history and bring an opening to a newness from the Black community that oftentimes we whites have closed our eyes to. So we celebrate freedom in a new and different way this week. But we do continue as a community to pray for justice, to pray for peace, to pray for our brothers and sisters who are missing from our gathering this morning, for those whose faces we miss, for those whose lives we miss. We pray for those who have lost loved ones. We pray for those who have lost so much in this season of COVID as our numbers continue to rise. I invite you to think of someone this morning. Think of someone who you haven't seen throughout the 3 months, maybe, almost 4 months now. Think of someone's face that you miss. Think of someone's smile that you miss seeing. And take the opportunity to share a postcard, to share a text, to share an email, or to share a phone call with them. I invite you to do that right now if you'd like. Take the opportunity to stop the video, to send that text, to make that phone call. We'll be here when you get back. Welcome back. What a wonderful time to take the opportunity to remember folks as we join here in this space for worship, and as we recognize that in their absence, they are so very present with us. The fountain, amazing. Isn't it a constant flow? As we come to this time of individual prayer and reflection, and as we listen to Susan pray a song, I invite you to think about your breath. Come back to that grounding point of your breath as you breathe in that confession of God and who God is for you, and as you breathe out the possibilities for reconciliation. Listening to the constancy of the water flowing and grounding yourself in your breath. I invite you to a time of prayer. Breathe with me, and then we'll move in to Susan's prayer. Breathing in a confession of faith. God, you are our God. And out, we are called to do your work. God, you are our God. And you live to do your work. God, you are our God. And we live to do your work. Continue breathing as we listen to Susan's hymn of prayer.
Lord, listen to your children pray. Lord, send your spirit in this place. listen to your children praying. Send us love, send us power, send us grace. Lord, listen to your children praying. Lord, send your spirit in this place. Lord, listen to your children praying. Send us love, send us power, send us grace.
Will you join with me in prayer? Continuing to listen to the fountain and continuing to connect with your breath and continuing to think of Susan's words of invitation. Let us pray. Listening God, your ears are always open to us, listening constantly for our petitions, for our prayers, for our words of confession, and seeking reconciliation. We celebrate your listening ears, O God, ears that hear confessions of who we are and who we hope to be. Ears that hear praises, praises that are heartfelt and praises that are offered even within our hearts when our hearts struggle to see and hear and offer praise. Ears that hear prayers too deep for words, prayers that come in sighs, or breaths, or tears, or gasps for breath. Ears that hear the laments of our world, laments that decry injustice, laments that call into conversations inconsistencies, laments that name the changes that are happening in our world oh so quickly, but oh so necessarily. Ears that hear that which we will share with no one else. Those things that are so deep within us, we only trust you to hear them, to know them. In these prayers, O God, offered silently this day and confessionally other days, we celebrate that your listening ears hear trust in the confessions, in the laments, in the prayers of praise. Confidence that through your undying love, our lives will be continually reconciled to you. And in words of penitence and in words of confession, we can be reconciled one to another, gifted by the community of love. Amen. Today we conclude the sermon series on Job, and this is our scripture for this morning. We'll be reading from 41, 1 to 11, and then on in 42, we'll be reading God's, response to God from Job, and that goes on, I think, until about verse 15. So hear now these words from the Hebrew Bible, Job. Or, can you pull the sea beast Leviathan with a fly rod and stuff him in your creel? Can you lasso him with a rope? Or snag him with an anchor? Will he beg you over and over for mercy, or flatter you with flowery speech? Will he apply for a job with you? To run errands and to serve you the rest of your life? Will you play with him as if he were a pet goldfish? Will you make him the mascot of your neighborhood children? Will you put him on display in the market and have shoppers haggle over the price? Could you shoot him full of arrows like a pincushion, or drive harpoons into his huge head? If you so much as lay a hand on him, you won't live to tell the story. What hope would you have with such a creature? Why, one look at him would do you in. And if you can't hold your own against his glowering visage, how then do you expect to stand up to me? Who could comfort me and get by with it? I'm in charge of all of this. I run this universe. And God answered Job, I'm convinced you can do anything and everything. Nothing and no one can upset your plans. You asked, who's muddying the water, ignorantly confusing the issue, second guessing my purposes? I admit I was the one. I babbled on about things far beyond me, made small talk about wonders way over my head. You told me, listen and let me do the talking. Let me ask the questions. You give the answers. I admit I once lived by rumors of you. Now I have it all firsthand from my own eyes and ears. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'll never do that again. I promise. I'll never again live on crusts of hearsay, crumbs, of rumors. After God had finished addressing Job, he turned to Eliphaz the Temanite and said, I've had it with you and your two friends. I'm fed up. You haven't been honest either with me or about me, not like my friend Job was. So here's what you must do. Take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my friend Job. Sacrifice a burnt offering on your own behalf. My friend Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. He will ask me not to treat you as you deserve for talking nonsense about me and for not being honest with me as he was. And they did it. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what God commanded. And God accepted Job's prayer. After Job had interceded for his friends, God restored his fortune and then doubled it. All his brothers and sisters and friends came to his house and celebrated. They told him how sorry they were and consoled him for all the trouble God had brought him. Each of them brought generous housewarming gifts. God blessed Job's later life even more than his earlier life. He ended up with 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 team of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and daughters. He named the first daughter Dove, the second Cinnamon, and the third Dark Eyes. There was not a woman in the country as beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father treated them as equals with their brothers, providing the same inheritance. That's the concluding reading for the book of Job for this series. As I read this text from Job, I read it a little bit differently in the time that we find ourselves. I've heard so many sermons and thoughts on the ending of this text. But in the time that we are, I kind of thought a little differently, or maybe went more devotionally, thinking more about how this text speaks to a time of confession and forgiveness and listening. So, we're in this season as a country and as a community and as a faith community. And it's a season of confession. Really, it's a season of looking deeply at who we are and looking deeply at who God is calling us to be. And when I think of confession, I think that there's a couple of steps that we're participating in, and we recognize that there's parts to a confession. There's the truth-telling of the event, listening to that situation and encountering that situation, and then confessing the situation of which we're a part. And in Job, there's this time of confession, whether it's God confessing, whether it's a friend confessing, or whether it's Job confessing. And then there's this act of forgiveness that happens. And in that act of forgiveness, reconciliation can follow. And as we've traveled through Job these last several weeks, we've witnessed the injustice that Job is experiencing. The injustice of being the pawn in an agreement between God and the Satan. And that we've witnessed the inability of the friends to hear Job. And their inability to be able to connect with Job in ways that are helpful. And we've witnessed the sense of despair that fell over Job as he lived into the economic and social, physical, emotional, spiritual despair that he felt. And then we come to this conclusion. And this conclusion, I think, it is a time of confession. It's a time of listening to confessions. It's a time of hearing confessions. And it's a time of making way for reparations, forgiveness, and moving on. And I guess I wonder at the end of Job, how do the main characters that are interacting throughout this entire book, how do these characters bring resolution one with another? What is God confessing? What's God hearing? What's God offering? What's Job confessing? What's Job hearing? What's Job offering? What are the friends confessing? What are the friends hearing? What are they offering? And it seems to me they each have this time of confession and being heard and offered reconciliation. If I may, God began this mess, right? God began this mess way back in the first 2 chapters, in those introductory chapters, where he and the Satan got together and had this little bet going because God had full trust in Job. I mean, kind of a backhanded compliment to Job, right? I trust you so much, Job, that I know I'm going to win So sure, let's go for it. And it seems like they shake hands on a bet, and the story continues. And in that, God kind of confesses that God is God. Job is Job. And God has created the world, has set it in motion, has established what it is, and set boundaries on what happens, and then sets creation free, perhaps, to live. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't catch it, humanity's not necessarily the center of this creation. We're not the big people on the block, right? God hardly ever even mentions humanity. And this confession of creation and of who God is heard by Job. And Job hears God's amazing power and sees what God is saying about creation. And hears that God limits and puts boundaries around it. And that's the way life is. Each part of creation is intended to be who it is, what it is. And it's beautiful. Even the Leviathan has its place. And whether you're human or animal, Leviathan, plant, or a sunset, that is all within God's power. And it's not in Job's power. And I think there's this hearing that Job offers God. And within Job's heart, there is a forgiveness that's offered to God for God's part in whatever the mess of his life, the chaos of his life is. So God's granted forgiveness by the one who was wronged, Job, and restores the one who was wronged to relationship. And I wonder how often does God need our forgiveness when we get angry with God for what we experience as unjust or unnecessary or whatever we blame God for? How often do we need to forgive God for what we think God has done? And then there's the friends, right? There's Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar. And as we come to that section of the story, it's the ending. And God's really upset with them. If you heard that in the reading of the text, God is really upset with them because they didn't give God God's due. God accuses them of not being honest, not acting with integrity, not being righteous. And God tells them what to do. God gets a hearing. God gets a hearing. And he tells them to go make this sacrifice. And the sacrifice will be honored, not for anything they've done, but for what Job has done. And God will accept Job's prayer, and only Job's prayer. And Job must pray to God for his friends' forgiveness, because they talk nonsense. They talk nonsense about God, and they didn't present God honorably. I think I would have liked to have been in the corner, a little mouse listening to that conversation and the confession that Job would have heard from his friends as they got together to talk about the sacrifice and to talk about God's need for Job to pray for the friends. And I can only imagine them saying, maybe much like I would say, we didn't know we were doing anything wrong. We didn't know we were talking foolishness. We were doing our best to try and comfort Job. We were doing what we thought was faithful. We were sharing our faith and how we were taught. We thought we were helping you. And God, the forgiven God, restored. That's restored with Job, right? Because Job has offered God this forgiveness. This God that was forgiven and restored in relationship to Job, and this God who is wronged by the friends, provides a pathway to restoration for those who wronged God through the one that they wronged. And Job restores God in relationship to his friends. And that relationship is healed in sacrifice. And I have to wonder today, how often is a broken relationship with God restored when we are willing to act as a vehicle of restoration for others? Even when we are the one that was wrong. And Job, where's Job at the end of the story? Job and God have this honest, heartfelt confession and sharing and listening one to another. Job goes immediately and directly to God. Do we find him with the answer of, why do bad things happen to good people? No, we don't find that answer here. What we do have is Job, a human created by God, reconciled to God, who lives within the limits and boundaries of God's creation. He doesn't comprehend why, but he knows who. He knows that God is God. And Job, through the entire story of this injustice, Job seems to be at the whims of an unjust God, experiencing unjust things for no reason at all. And he lacks the knowledge of why. He's a just and righteous person. Why? Why does he have to endure being totally wiped out? Why does he have to experience all of the loss? And he remains faithful. He remains honest. He remains right relationship to God and his friends. And in those relationships, through those actions, restoration occurs. He forgives God and he's in reconciliation. He's reconciled to God. He confesses his own inabilities, his own weaknesses directly to God. And he's in relationship restored to his friends. Perhaps when we ask the story of Job to answer the question, why bad things happen to good people, we are asking the question we want an answer to, rather than wondering about what the story might say. And this is only a segment of the story, and I am speaking in a context of today. But I wonder if the story reveals more about how to live with suffering, being faithful and righteous when everything around you is chaotic. Maybe it's about realizing that God can bring suffering. No. Maybe it's by realizing God can bring suffering, and whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or economic, when it comes, we are invited to live as Job does. In relationship, being honest, listening and hearing a confession from wherever it comes. listening and recognizing that God is God. Registering and expressing in our relationship to God and working through our very real emotions. There is also the invitation to be a vehicle of restoration and reconciliation with those who are experiencing separation and alienation. We're in a period of COVID, and we're in a period of systemic change due to the racism that's being called. And we are experiencing, as a white people, we are experiencing a lot of change, and we're recognizing a lot of injustice. And today, in this place and space, we don't know what it all means. We don't know what tomorrow holds, but we know that it is within our ability to confess, to listen, and to work toward restoration. And it's high time we listen to this story of Job, to demonstrate what we've learned. It's high time to examine who we are and what we are, not only as individuals, but as a church, as a country. It's time to listen. Listen. Black Lives Matter. It's time to accept and offer ways toward reconciliation. And that will involve forgiveness all the way around, and a walking together toward a new world that's coming. And it is being that vehicle for that forgiveness to come. Several years ago, I attended the Festival of Homiletics, and there was an artist there whose name was Sarah Renner. And I think it was Brian McLaren that had spoke that night on forgiveness. And she sang this song entitled Forgive. And it touched my heart then, and I hope it touches your heart now as we think about forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, forgiving God, and moving forward to a new space, a new day, a new way. Let's listen to Forgive, sung by Sarah Renner.
Part of you, a part of me is frozen in a tragedy. So many words left unsaid are still here ringing in your head. Let all the demons that led you here disappear. If you wanna live, forgive. We walk this world with wounded hearts, define our faces by our scars, till pain begins to taste like freedom. And bitterness is who we are. Before the ones who love you here disappear. If you wanna live, forgive. Let this pain pour out like water through a sieve. wanna live.
Forgiveness. So often it comes in chaos. And as we conclude our worship today, I share with you a blessing in the chaos. It comes from The Cure for Sorrow, a book of blessings and times of grief by Jan Richardson. Hear these words for blessing in the chaos. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you, even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness, or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you find the peace you did not think possible, and see what shimmers within the storm. May you move through this week, hearing confessions, listening with your heart, offering reconciliation, forgiveness, restoration, praying for you always, as you pray for me. God bless, and have a good week.